Hello, hello. What is up, everybody? We're back with another video, and this one's gonna be random because a lot of what I do on here is random anyway. I've been revisiting Castlevania games on stream. Castlevania Mega Man, big surprise, right? Big part of my childhood, so we're revisiting a bunch of the games with kind of like a new light or new view on things. Because things change, right? So, my view on Order of Ecclesia. I revisited this game because I wanted to directly compare it to its spiritual successor in a lot of ways, since Konami wasn't having that. Iga was with the team that he put together. But I wanted to revisit Order of Ecclesia, and I decided to do so through totally legit means, which is actually really funny because the Dominus collection dropped, I think, the very next week, and I supported that. So, kind of funny that that worked out that way. As a result, I may have to go to Ecclesia again because I'm going to revisit all the games, and it's going to bother me that I don't have a completion crown by Ecclesia, but have it by Aria of Sorrow and Portrait of Ruin. Not Aria, Dawn of Song. Dawn of Song. I get the two confused. Aria is the other one, the previous one. Anyway, enough ranting. We've wasted enough of an intro with a rant. So, Ecclesia. I still like the game, but there are definitely aspects that I do not like and are kind of tedious. So, Ecclesia, you don't have like one map. The areas, you have like smaller areas that you can unlock as you progress through the game. I don't necessarily have a problem with that, with the game not taking place in one big connected map necessarily. But what I don't like is you take away from the pacing of the game with side quests that are not really all that necessary. Or I should say are necessary if you want to get any decent healing items. To lock that behind side quests is silly to me. I feel like there's equipment locked behind that too, or I might just be blending thoughts with the soul synthesis system of Dawn of Sorrow, having just recently played that as well. But this is about Ecclesia versus Bloodstained. Simply because I wanted to compare the two. Obviously, Shinoa is a big influence for... I can't remember her name now, thinking off the top of my head. What the hell is her name? From Bloodstained. Starts with an M. Yes, I'm going... Miriam. Miriam. I didn't even have to fully type in anything to look it up. Miriam. Very similar. And maybe what Shinoa would have been if she wasn't, like, stripped of the entirety of her memory and personality, like, period. I thought her character was pretty awesome, all that considered. But imagine if she did have a personality throughout the game. And she like, develops one. She gets feelings and stuff. She starts to remember things or put pieces together as she's brainwashed throughout the game. So, I mean, the story's decent. The music's fantastic. I do think the game plays well. But the dislike comes from quests that lock off things that I don't think that they should. Killing the pacing of the game, as well as some of the boss fights are questionable because it makes you wonder if it's actually just the quote-unquote Dark Souls of Castlevania. Is it difficult because the bosses are actually difficult, or just that you feel cramped in the rooms that they're in? I think an argument can be made for either side, or both things actually apply, perhaps. Whatever the cause is, it does in turn make the game more difficult. And I could see why it's harder to get into from that aspect, and I will say, like, certain ones are quite tedious. Like the one guy with the silhouette is not so great because you have very little room to fight him, and his attacks, well, the boss and attacks by association take up the majority of the screen, so there isn't a ton you can do about it. There's another boss where you kind of have to attack its front, its feet, and also like get on top of it. You get more room-ish for that fight, but you have to keep going to different parts of it in order to kill it properly, and like most bosses in the game, it's a bullet sponge. You also have to spend time farming that I don't think is the best use of your time. It's not a game that's respectful of your time. And I have this feeling with both Dawn of Sorrow and Ecclesia. And of course, now I'm getting off topic, but let's just stick to Ecclesia here, where you have to... The most effective way to use your weapons that you get is to dual wield. And if you want to dual wield, that means getting that enemy soul twice. I don't want to do that. You know? Sometimes you do have to spend that extra time if you want that ideal build. So this ended up making me at times not caring about necessarily dual wielding per se, and just sticking with weapons that are close enough to the weapon class because I don't want to spend the extra time doing that. This was solved more in Bloodstained because you don't have to rely on that. Bloodstained did the whole... They do shards instead of the enemy souls that you get. But the shards... And provided you have to farm those too with their nonsense drop rates, that's just kind of a thing with all of these. But in that it was done better because you had different types of shards, and there was 5 different types. And you can customize that accordingly. Instead of like dual wielding weapons, like your weapons were... Whatever you equip for a weapon was different from what you absorb with Shinoa, the enemy souls that you get with Shinoa, because that's directly tied to whatever weapon you use. So those were separated in Ecclesia, and I like that. I prefer that actually. But the thing with Ecclesia is it's decent. If you like Metroidvanias, you probably should play it, specifically Igavanias, you know. The music's pretty alright. It's not like... It's not top-tier Castlevania music, but it is not... It's good. It's just not, you know, S-tier, I guess you could say. But it's good for what it is. And the game is good for what it is. But everything's just kind of okay. Where Ecclesia takes a hit is story, because the characters are decent, but I don't care enough about what's going on. It's kind of like you're just going through the motions with the game, especially at a certain point. And even the likes of, say, like David Hayter as Zangatsu, or the voice actor for Alucard in Symphony of the Night, English voice actor, Robert Belgrade, I think is his name. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I might have messed that up, so forgive me if I did. Who voices Alucard, does OD, in other words, the true final fight of that game. Because the final boss is kind of a pushover by comparison. Which was a thing in Symphony as well, in my opinion. I don't think that's really up for debate so much. I do think Galamoth is way harder than Dracula. And of course, once again, we are sidetracked, because that's what we do here. But comparing the two games, you know, they both have their big pluses and their big minuses, in my personal opinion. You know, you don't really get a connection to a connected map until you get to Dracula's castle towards the end of Order of Ecclesia, and then at that point you you get a bigger map for that section of the game. But the whole game itself, like the areas don't connect like that. You don't get that kind of feeling until the very end. I don't have an issue with either or. I know Portrait of Ruin is like that. I have to revisit that at some point. I'm going to be doing that live at some point. With all the sidetracking I'm doing, I should probably actually remember to plug my Twitch in the description for once. But yeah, it was interesting to revisit both of these games with their pluses and minuses. I do think my opinion overall, especially if we're like talking about the entirety of the Dominus collection. I don't know why I said almost said connection there. But if we're comparing all of those, Ecclesia might take some steps down in my personal rankings for Castlevania. Especially when I think about others I could potentially put in its place. It was originally, of the trilogy, of the DS trilogy, it was originally my favorite. I don't think that's the case anymore. But Dawn of Sorrow also has its own case of tedious things in the game where you only get so many upgrades for your weapon unless you use the soul synthesis system, which of course boils down to more tedious farming, which is a thing in Araya as well. For as good as that game is, it's just a shame because in any of these games you have, you know, a drop rate that is not so great, and if you want to experience the game in its entirety, you're gonna have to spend the time to do that. So it does take away from the pacing of the game if you're trying to go through it normally. I do think it is much easier to do that in Aria. In Dawn of Sorrow, it's probably possible, although not ideal. Somewhat possible in Ecclesia. I think you have the most flexibility in Bloodstained that we're talking about here, to actually stay on topic as we get distracted like every 2 minutes or so. But yeah, it's been awesome to go back to these games. It's been highly influenced by a project that I decided to participate in where I lended voice talent, kind of came out of my shell to do a Castlevania redub fan project of sorts for Symphony of the Night, in which I play Dracula. If there is a way to share that in some capacity, I will do so, but I don't know. Just waiting for it to be done. It's been some time. It's been a couple months, actually. Just waiting for that to be finished. It should be finished around end month is the current ETA. So if there's a way to share that, I will. If any of you guys are happen to be listening to this, thank you, because the inspiration throughout this project has inspired me to go back and revisit really a lot of these games. I was already revisiting Mega Man games on stream, and now I'm doing these. So a lot of these, because Mega Man and Castlevania are just real big for me. They always have been, they always will be. It's just looking at these things through a different lens and realizing that certain aspects that I tolerated as a child, I do not tolerate anymore as an adult, because I have a lot of respect for a game that respects your time, which might make Portrait of Ruin win by default, but I have not revisited that one yet. But maybe that's another topic for another time, or possibly not even on here, but it will be live at some point. But revisiting these two games, it's cool to see, you know, the transition between the two, because like the last traditional like real Igavania was Ecclesia, and of course it has the direct comparisons to Bloodstained with a lot of the same team without the Konami name. I had it right the first time. The Konami name. And it just sucks, because, like, outside of most recent Haunted Castle Remastered, which is great, sidetracked once again, but that is amazing, and it's a good time to be a Castlevania fan. There's obviously the representation through Dead Cells and some other stuff like Dead by Daylight. I'm not really into that though, but it's cool to see. But a new full-fledged Castlevania game that just entirely new, or maybe like a remake of one of the awesome games or whatever, would be really, I think it's time, you know, or to, because of the good job Motion Twin or Evil Empire, whoever, did with the Dead Cells DLC, Return to Castlevania, maybe it's time to let them run with the license and let them do something. So, yeah, this went a lot of different ways, so maybe this won't just be, even though the footage is definitely going to reflect one game versus the other. Both are okay games. I don't put either game on a pedestal that I previously did. I'm not sure I ever put Bloodstained on that pedestal, honestly. It was just nice to get something within the same realm of Castlevania and done by the same team. But even back then, when I thought it was better than I currently think it is, because again, I think at a certain point you just kind of go through the motions with that game. It's fine for what it is, but it's not like, it's not something you're attached to. I would say I'm more attached to Ecclesia, even with its downfalls, as opposed to Bloodstained. But I highly respect the effort, and I think a lot of good work went into that, and it's enjoyable. So anyone that has not played either of these games, I would highly recommend doing so, especially if you're into Metroidvanias. Otherwise, if you're looking specifically at Castlevania, there's probably better options for you, but it's a decent one to check out. These revisits have been fun, continue to be fun on my live streams. I just wanted to revisit for myself and put something up here for these two, considering how similar they are in certain aspects. Like, one might as well be a spiritual successor to the other. And that's kind of all I got in this, for this particular video, or this particular outlook of things. I have to sort through other things I've recorded to figure out what I'm going to put up here next. Because I feel like I've recorded a lot of random stuff lately, but haven't necessarily done anything with it. So I need to figure out what that's going to be. But before this gets too much more ranty than it already has been, with the sidetracks into other stuff as well, I thank you all for whoever may take the time to check this out. And expect more stuff as it comes if you want stuff more often, even though I don't have a set schedule. You are probably better off following Twitch, as stuff goes here only so often. So take care, everybody, and have a great one. Later.